Back to them. That one.
Attention music, forward, march. Come over, I will help interpret what we're doing today. You might want to know. Very good. Let's get into some semblance. We are the Calvert Arms Fife and Drum Corps, based out of somewhere in Maryland. I'm with the Pennsylvania Volunteers, or make us Union Volunteers, and we are a battalion. And so if I had my heavy, filthy, rotten, suffocating blue uniform on, I would recreate death. Many men died here at Gettysburg because of what? Heat exhaustion, heat stroke.
Okay. Front range.
Just show up as a fatality. I don't want to be that. So I'm a little bit loose in my garb I'm wearing. But I'm here to interpret for you, and interpret means what exactly they're doing. As you can see, divided right down the middle. One side you have the drummers, fifers on the right side. The man with the wonderful shako. Jeff Spangler, related to the Spanglers of Spangler Farm. That gentleman is the principal musician. Larry. Sergeant Major Stripes.
We're going to play, Rich. Thank you.
Yeah, let's take it in. Let's listen to it. Okay, very good. Quickly, I want to just say something about field music, then we'll go again.
Go.
Quickly. What we have, I have a bugle, I have a cornet here, and then you have these gentlemen. Field musicians. They would be in these categories of a bugler. They can go up in rank to be the bugler of field, whatever, head bugler.
Chief bugler.
Chief bugler. Cornets very much were bands, but it's going to change around 1862, when of course the budget is not there anymore. Who's going to fly first? Cornets. They're gone. Field musician means you were a bugler. That term is rarely used like a bugler. It's mostly field musician. 50 calls total you have to learn as a recruit. What you see right now is how you would be taught. On the Union side, you would be at Governor's Island. How old are you? How much? 10? You're getting close. And he's going to get dumped in. No, don't force him, man. You can take a horse to the trough, but you can't force him. It's got to be in there. And gradually what's going to happen is you guys are going to be So how are you going to identify who's with who and what? We'll all be creating a prelude, and that prelude, when played, says this is who we are, this is us. And the next call will be what you're supposed to be. What's the difference between a cornet and a bugle? Happens to be the tubing. Cornet is smaller than the bugle. That's the way it works. We play basically both of those. Hear how it can cut? Cornet can be played to put the men on the battlefield. This, and one quickie here, in the camp. These gentlemen, after war, after battle, what have they got to do? Try to heal. There's something that every one of them could have after 1852. This is... Stephen Foster's Hard Times, written in 1855, and that's what you gentlemen are going to be seeing in 1863 here in July. It's true. Do your homework. I taught college for 27 years. This is as much Oh, yeah. 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 Nice. PhD. I thought you got to all look at it relative. You got to tip it. If you aren't hearing it from here, what the case is
Let them roll that up just a little bit, Ray. As Tom mentioned, we're going to be firing an original chain rifle. We're going to fire one round for you. Then I'm going to go through every position to give you a better understanding of each man's job and the function of the gun. And then we'll fire another round for you. But in between, we're going to have some information that we can give you on First Rhode Island Artillery and artillery in general. Now, Battery B was mustered into federal service on August 13th, 1861, and they were involved in every major campaign that the Army of the Potomac was involved in. They were not at Appomattox, but they were on the road, first in line, when the flag of truce came through the lines. And according to the regimental history, the flag of truce was dipped to go under the guidon of Battery B. So in respect, they lowered the flag of truce as they rode by the battery's guidon. They were also involved in the Grand Review, which took place in Washington after the war. It took 3 days for the entire Army to pass the reviewing stand. Obviously, it wasn't night and day, but it still took 3 days for the entire Army. So that gives you an idea how many men were in uniform at that time. So, folks, we're going to go right into our firing demo for you. We're going to load. I'll give you a heads up when the gun is loaded so you can block your ears. But for now, we're going to go right to load and firing. First Sergeant? Sir. On your command.
Gunner, load! Load!
A good gun crew could get off as many as 3 rounds in a minute during the war. That was considered average. Of course, by today's safety standards, we only fire 1 round every 3 minutes. National Park rules state 1 round every 10 minutes.
Ready! Charge is prime!
Now, folks, the gun is loaded, ready to fire. At this point, if you could do me a favor and please block your ears.
Sergeant, pieces up and ready.
On your command.
Gunner, on your command. Fire!
Now, folks, that was a very small charge. And you saw how much powder was pushed out of that gun. Imagine a 6-gun battery all firing at once, full service charges. The enemy eyes are going to become pretty obscure, so they need to see where those first rounds are landing because they're going to be doing a lot of compensating from there. Now, I said a 6-gun battery. That was typical during the war. 6 guns for each battery. Some in the Confederate Army were made up of 4 guns because they were running low on equipment. But for the Union Army, a gun crew would have, a battery would have had 6 guns in it. Each gun is commanded by a sergeant. The entire battery is commanded by a captain. Each section, comprising of 2 guns, is commanded by a lieutenant. Now, as soon as the men are ready, I'm going to go through the different positions. I'll call their number or position, and they will raise their hand or an implement. Number one man. Number one man sponges and rams. The sponge extinguishes any lit embers that might be left behind by the previous round, making it very dangerous. Their rounds are wrapped in a flannel cotton bag. We also use a crooked handle rammer at this position, something that was not used during the war. We use it for safety purposes. Number two man inserts the charge and worms. Now the worm extracts any powder bag remnants that might be left behind smoldering. We also dry sponge at this position. Again, something that was not done during the war. We do it for safety purposes. Number three. The number three man tends the vent and pierces the charge. When I say tend the vent, he actually has a little glove on just his thumb, which we call the thumb stall. That's placed over the vent, and that keeps any air from being sucked in when the sponge is pulled out, because it creates kind of like a vacuum. When it pulls out, air could rush down, fan any of those lit embers that might be left in there, again making it very dangerous for the next round. He pierces the charge open with a priming wire. It's a little thin brass wire that's placed into the vent. It's pushed down, pierces open the charge, and that exposes the powder for the friction primer. Number four. The number four man actually fires the gun. That cord he's holding has a little iron hook on one end. That's put into a little loop on the friction primer. The friction primer is a little tube of brass with a powder charge in it. Has a wire that comes in at 90 degrees. It's twisted and forms a loop. When that hook is pulled in there and pulled, it creates a little spark that sets off that little powder charge. That sends a flame down into the main chamber, and that's what sets off the main powder charge, which propels the projectile. Number five. Number five man brings ammunition up from the limber to the gun. He never actually handles the ammunition. It's placed in there back in the chest, and the number two man takes it out for insertion into the tube. Now, depending on what type of projectile the gunner calls for, he might stop to show the gunner that it's been properly fused. So again, depending on the shell. Number 6, 7, and 8 men would have been back here at the chest, preparing ammunition, cutting fuses, and keeping a running total of how many ammunition or how many projectiles are left and how many have been expended. There's also a chart on the inside lid of that limber box cover, and that gives information that he can relay back to the gunner. The gunner today is our Mr. Jones has filled in for our normal corporal. The gunner is in charge of the entire crew. He calls for the different types of projectiles. He makes sure the men are doing their job according to the prescribed manual, and he's also watching for the effects on the enemy lines and compensating from there. Chief of the Peace. Chief of the Peace is our First Sergeant Pedro. Today he's filling in as Chief of the Peace. He would be making sure that the caisson that would have been to the rear of this gun is bringing up ammunition as needed. This vehicle to the rear is a limber, and I'll explain that later on in the program. Now, there's also two other individuals on the field that are very important, and that is the bugler and the guidon bearer. The guidon bearer is always with the captain, so if they need to make a visual of where the captain is, they just look for the guidon, and that's where the captain is. The bugler is the voice of the commander. During a battle, voice commands cannot be heard, so the bugler is giving the commands that the commander is giving through the bugle calls, and all the men know what to do when they hear those calls. Even the horses that were hitched to these vehicles became accustomed to the bugle calls, so they knew what was going to happen, and they knew what they had to do. So folks, now I'm going to go through some rounds for you. Time, Corporal?
About 10 minutes.
We're going to go through another firing, but I'm going to describe some projectiles for you. Now, when this gun was first made, it was a smoothbore gun. It's a model 1841 6-pounder that went through the James conversion. Now, when we say conversion, a lot of these 6-pounders that were used during the Mexican War, and this one is dated 1845, were worn out by the time the Civil War broke out. So, rather than discard them, It was a general from Rhode Island, General Charles Tillinghast James, that came up with the idea of boring out those worn spots and then broaching in rifling, upgrading the gun to a light 12-pound rifle from a smoothbore 6-pounder. This gave it a little more time for the new weapons that were coming online to get into service. So it was kind of a band-aid, but it worked for a while just to get the new guns up and running. Now, as I said, a smoothbore, it would fire a round projectile. Now, they didn't know what surface this ball was going to land on. So when they needed a shell for an explosive round, it had to be placed in here, back at the chest, and it's strapped to this little wooden disc, which we call the sabot or sabot, and so it ensures that it's always going to be pointing outward. When the powder bag goes off, the flames engulf the ball, and that's what sets that fuse. So now that's burning in flight.
Well, it's not real bad.
As it burns, it's getting shorter and shorter, and now it's going to explode around. Now, they could cut fuses. Now, fuses are not like fuses like we think of in a firecracker. It looks like a little cigar. It's a paper mache wrapped compound of fulminated mercury and gunpowder. And it could be cut to any length. And there's little hash marks on the side of this, what looks like a little cigar, and that designates 1 second of burn time. So they can cut a fuse from 10 seconds down to 1, anything in between. Now, because the gun is a rifle gun, now it fires this bullet-shaped or conical-shaped projectile. Now they know this is going to land on the snow, so now they can have an impact detonator system. They don't need to have this lit when the gun goes off. So now this is in flight, it hits the ground, and this will explode once it gets the impact. That little detonator inside lights off a little charge, which sets off the big powder charge that's in the interior of this. And inside, depending on whether it's a shell or it's case shot, would have little iron balls or just the fragments from the projectile itself that would go off. Now these guns also fired what we call canisters, and that turns the gun into a giant shotgun. We cut a little window out of this one.
Raise a lot.
There's probably about 27 of them. And as I said, it turns the gun into a giant shotgun. So when those guys were coming across Pickett Charge Field, they were being fired upon by this. When they got to that fence line, they actually loaded 2 of these. So that's the term you'll hear referred to as double canister. It's 2 of these that go down, and the powder bag projects all those iron balls. Now you say to yourself, gee, how could those guys possibly be getting through that? Well, they were getting hit. They just kept going. They were so determined to take those positions, and their adrenaline was so high that even though they were getting hit, a lot of them kept going. And after they came, some of them came back to the other side, those that had not been hit and killed, they looked at their uniforms and couldn't believe how many holes were in their uniforms and their accoutrements. Now you say to yourself, that is a devastating thing the guys could be launched into, and knowing what was being fired at them. But they were so determined to take those positions. It's the kind of soldiers during the war, before the war, and after the war, they were as committed as the beginning. And most soldiers you talk to who have been in combat, if you ask them if they would do the same thing over, they would probably say, well, maybe a little bit different. But the Civil War soldier was as committed at the end as he was in the beginning. And if asked if he would do it over, the answer would be yes. A lot of those guys that went back after Pickett's charge wanted to go again. They said they could take those positions, and they wanted to do it again. And it was the leadership that decided that it was the end for them, at least here at Gettysburg. Now, folks, we're going to fire one more round for you. Now that you have a much better understanding of the positions, you'll understand how every man's job is and what the function is. Sergeant? Gunner, load! Load! Now, folks, number 5 man is bringing the round up. Number 2 is taking it out of the powder transfer bag and inserting it into the tube. Number 1 is now ramming.
Cutting the piece.
The gunner has chosen to go up and sight the piece. He gives a sign he's ready.
Ready.
The charge is now being pierced.
Priming charge!
And the friction primer is now being set into the tube. Folks, again, the gun is ready to fire, so if you can do me a favor and please block your ears.
Something ready. Sir, ready to fire.
On your command.
Gunner, on your command.
Fire!
You guys survived in the war.
Well, you gotta get the sweat going on and then the breeze goes a little bit. It almost feels like you're in an air conditioner. You get used to it. Those boys, those boys had undergarments on too. So you can imagine
All the fight, all the one, running around, all that get out of the way, get out of the way,
carefully all the
Left, face, forward, march. Hold, front.
Welcome to Battery B, First Rhode Island Light Artillery ceremonial honoring of the battery that was here and their service with the Gettysburg gun. Before we begin this appropriate and very, very wonderful ceremony, the National Park Service here at Gettysburg would like to honor Battery B, 1st Rhode Island, with a safety award. Superintendent Ed Clark has given me the authority to honor Battery B for 20 years coming to Gettysburg and performing every countless numbers of programs that they have done for the public in the most and highest standards of the safety standards of the National Park Service. The way we honor here at Gettysburg groups that have done outstanding work in the area of safety is we honor them with the Medal and the Order of St. Benedict. St. Benedict is the patron saint of safety and all things safe. Presenting the award to the battery commander, Mr. Phil D. Maria, is William Aldrich, Major General U.S. Army, retired, and a resident, former resident of the state of Rhode Island, will be presenting the award of the Honor Medal of St. Benedict to the battery commander, Phil D. Maria. Gentlemen. On a personal note, Phil D. Maria and Battery B for 20 years, not only have they performed to the highest standards of safety, why they are receiving the medal today, but on a personal note, Phil D. Maria and the battery has gotten through me a lot of different things over the years, including some health issues I've had in the past and present, and I tell you what, this man, along with the battery, is the best there is in this hobby. Let's give him a hand.
These programs could not have happened without this gentleman, Mr. Tom Holbrook, and we are this belongs to you all, because without you, I could not have done this, obviously. And I thank each and every one of you, and all of those gentlemen who are with us in spirit, not here, but in spirit, who have also earned this medal. I thank you all, the ladies and gentlemen of Battery B, 1st Rhode Island Artillery, for your constant service. Thank you, gentlemen. Gentlemen, post on the piece.
Now the battery will do their annual ceremony, the remembrance of Battery B, 1st Rhode Island, Brown's Battery. The monument is the smaller one right across the street, and they are going to perform a ceremony to honor those men who in 1863 fought so gallantly, and talk a little bit about the famous Gettysburg gun that's in the State House in Rhode Island.
Well, I assume everyone is familiar, and many of you hopefully are familiar with that gun. There is a cannonball actually lodged in the muzzle of the gun, and it did not fire, and it is in that condition in the State House as a memorial.
Thank you, General Aldrich, for your service. Ladies and gentlemen, Phil D. Maria. Bill D. Maria, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, very well.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the story of the Gettysburg gun. In response to President Lincoln's call in 1861 for defenders of the country's honor, integrity, and principles of liberty, young men from Rhode Island, full of patriotism, ambition, and health, offered their services. One of those units would be Battery B of the 1st Rhode Island Light Artillery. One of the most important events in Battery B's history took place in position on Cemetery Ridge. At 1 p.m., over 100 Confederate guns opened fire. An equal number of Union guns were quick to reply. The coming fight would be described as one of the most terrible ever witnessed on this continent. It would be the high watermark of the Confederacy. The 4th gun of Battery B had already been hit twice and received minor damage. Cannoneers William Jones and Alfred Gardner had already stepped into place and were ready to load. It was at that instant that a rebel shell struck the gun and exploded. Let us step back in time to that moment, to that instant, through written words of the men who lived, fought, and died there this day.
Charles A. Brown, in command of the 3rd and 4th pieces of Battery B, 1st Rhode Island Light Artillery. I have been ordered to place my guns in line on Cemetery Ridge. A little further to the left, Captain Rorty's Battery B, 1st New York Light Artillery. Several rods to our right, and a little further to the front, is Lieutenant Cushing's 4th United States Artillery. During the morning, a desultory artillery fire was kept up, where the rebels were successful in blowing up several of the ammunition chests along our line. In retaliation, we performed the same services for them, which were accepted by both sides with constant cheers and yelling. As the morning wears on, suddenly there's a lull, a stillness, even unto death. The silence is ominous and pretentious of the coming evil. This is the calm which precedes the storm.
William Jones, #1 man. I am at my position in the front, between the muzzle of the piece and the wheel on the right side. I have just swabbed the tube with the sponge and have reversed the staff, waiting to ram the charge that will be inserted by Old Man Gardner, the #2 man. For a moment, my mind focuses on why I am here today. A Harvard man, spending my whole life dominated by an overbearing mother. At the outbreak of the rebellion, I find myself in the ranks of the artillery, under an assumed name, ready to die for my country if necessary. Little did I know it would be today, this instant. William Jones, forever. John Mahoney, forgotten.
Alfred G. Gardner, #2 man. I have just stepped to my position between the muzzle of the piece and the wheel on the left side. My back to the muzzle. #5 man has just brought the ammunition up. Reach over the wheel to receive the round. Suddenly, an explosion, a flash. Did the round go off? Oh my God, we're hit! Is that Jones with the top of his head blown off? Suddenly, excruciating pain. I realized that I too have been struck by the muscle of death. Alas, Sergeant Strait, my old 10-man, is by my side. Albert, send my Bible home to my wife. Tell her I died a happy man. Glory to God. Hallelujah. Amen. Amen.
Sergeant Albert Strait. A signal gun was fired on the enemy's right, soon followed by another, breaking the silence laying over the broody battlefield. The smoke from the guns had not yet dispersed when the whole rebel line was ablaze from the throats of over 100 cannon, rivaling the angriest thunder. Our men leaped to their positions, our riders to their horses, waiting for the order to commence firing. The order was finally given to commence firing and sent shrieking shot and shell on their works of destruction. My God, my gun has been struck! There's Jones with the top of his head blown off, and Gardner, his shoulder and arm.
Lance Corporal James M. Dye, gunner. We are hotly engaged with the enemy when suddenly a blinding explosion strikes the muzzle of my gun. Billy Jones lay with his head towards the enemy, the left side of his head completely blown off, while the sponge staff is thrown 2 to 3 yards beyond him. Old Mr. Gardner has been struck in the left shoulder, almost tearing his arm off. Suddenly, Sergeant Strait flashes by me as he races to his tent-mate side. My number 3 man is wounded and has gone to the rear. My number 4 man is on the ground, played out. I'm trying to get him up, to thumb the vent. He won't budge. So I grab a stone and tore a piece of my shirt off and lay it on the vent. I run up to join Sergeant Strait, who is taking the powder bag off the sabot. Suddenly, I realize a massive dent in the muzzle. Sergeant Strait rams the charge down the tube, yelling, "James, grab the ball and place it in the muzzle." As he swings on the rammer, I hold the shot in place, but the dent is too great. Suddenly someone yells, "Get an axe." I stumble out of the way as Strait wails on the shell with the axe. Another explosion. A rubber shell has struck the cheek and has knocked out a spoke. This raised the gun up on one wheel, but it does not dismount it. As the gun settles back down, it stops our efforts. The gun in cooling has clamped onto the shot so that we cannot get it out again. Sergeant Strait, finding that the piece cannot be loaded, reports it disabled. We have been ordered to the rear.
George Madison, number 6 man, ammunition fixer. Our battery's fire has begun to slacken for want of men and ammunition. It is 2:45 p.m. in the afternoon as Cowles battery comes up the ridge at a trot, wheels in the battery in our left front, and opens fire a spherical case shot on the enemy's line of infantry coming from the woods towards the Emmitsburg Road. We have been ordered to cease fire, and as the battery prepares to limber up after 2 grueling days of battle, we can see the enemy's line of infantry coming from the woods on Cemetery Ridge, 3/4 of a mile away. A line of their skirmishers have sprung into an open field, followed first by one line of battle, and then a second, and now a third. Here come the Johnnies. Puffs of smoke are now seen rising from their skirmishers as they dash forward, firing in reply to our skirmishers. As we prepare to leave the line of battle, the field in our immediate rear is being swept with the enemy's bursting shot and shell. My gun, with the shell lodged firmly in the tomb forever, and 2 other guns move diagonally towards the right, towards the Tawnytown Road. Our gun, forevermore known as the Gettysburg gun of Battery B, 1st Rhode Island Light Artillery.
Take this gun then, and place amongst the proudest archives of the state. Cherish it as a precious legacy from the men who bore it to the forefront of the battle and laid down their lives while serving it there. Tell your children and your children's children the story of its triumph. A triumph not of men against men, but a truth over error, right over wrong, freedom over slavery. Though this gun be forever silenced, though its voice will never again be heard in the thunders of war, yet it speaks to us and those that come after us in tones that cannot be misunderstood.
Prepare to fire. Ready. Fire. Ladies and gentlemen, of the remaining gun crew, Charles A. Brown, James Dye, and George Madison would survive the war. Sergeant Strait would die in November of 1863. 3 days later, Abraham Lincoln would dedicate the cemetery here. Folks, I'd like to thank you all for experiencing a little bit of Rhode Island history for us all. We're thankful to be here and share this with you. Thank you again.
Yeah! Mighty fine, boys and ladies. And that's all.
A company